a regular citizen who is being audited by the IRS. It is really confounding to me that we don't keep better records than this. It would appear to me that the IRS, in light of everything that has happened in the way of hard drives being wiped out, that your policy would be better and that you would be keeping better records. And so you can understand why the general public thinks, well, they think they're above the law here. I'm just flabbergasted by this. Mr. Chairman, I don't know what to say except that I hope that you will take this as a lesson and understand that, you know, there are people out there who are being audited by the IRS who feel like they're being targeted, feel like they're being treated unfairly, and feel like the IRS thinks they're above the law. So in instances like this, you can understand why they feel that way. This is unacceptable. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank the gentleman. Myself and Mr. Jordan have just a couple other questions, and we're going to wrap up the hearing, and members are advised that we have votes on the floor soon. Since when has the IRS preserved all of its internal emails? When have they started? When did they start to do that?
So our internal email, again, there's nuances to it.
You're either saving them all or you're not. Do you save all the emails?
All our internal emails are not being saved because but we have the plan in place in order to get there. All of our emails for our senior-most officials are saved. We've actually had substantial interaction with NARA, so I do want to get this point across that NARA has.
Hold on. I guess I want to get to this point. You still, to this day, do not preserve all of the IRS emails internally. You do not save those.
May I answer that question,
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman? The answer is we save them on our backup tapes and have since that original email that Representative Jordan was referring to.
Then why does Mr. Killen just tell me that we don't do that?
I think he was referring to all the
No, he can tell you what he's referring to.
I'm sorry, sir.
Mr. Killen, you just told me that they don't preserve all the emails.
Well, I think that there's a general difference there's a distinction between what we would have preserved on the network and what we have preserved via backup and disaster recovery process. And I think that's the distinction that Mr. Mulholland was going to make. With respect to, because I do want to be clear about this point, the directive that we are under is that all email should be in an electronically accessible format by the end of calendar year 2016. That is the plan that we have implemented. That's the plan that we're on the trajectory to meet. But in the interim, and again, this has all been a process that we've worked with NARA on. In the interim, our senior-most agency official emails are being preserved, and that's sort of talk about this multi-pronged approach that we've implemented.
Is there anything, Mr. Mulholland, that you would disagree with that he just said?
No, sir. We are going to be NARA compliant.
Here's the problem, okay? Here's the problem with the testimony. This is testimony from John Koskinen of June 23rd, 2014, and here's what he says. I would note, however, since the investigations into the application process for 501c4 organizations began in May of last year, the IRS, here it is, the IRS has saved backup tapes for all emails on the IRS's servers, which includes tapes for the 6 months preceding May of 2013. And you're telling me that isn't true. And that's why we keep coming after the IRS, and that's why we're not going to let go of this. I recognize the gentleman from Ohio.
Sir, can I make one statement, please?
If I could, Mr. Chairman, this would be my third time, and the right fine gentleman from North Carolina hasn't went, so I just have two questions anyway, Mr. Chairman.
I'll yield to the gentleman from Ohio for two questions and then take up the ballots. How about that?
Okay. So, Mr. Mulholland, when you on March 4th, when you discovered the tapes are destroyed, March 4th, 2014, the backup tapes are destroyed, you testified in the TIGTA investigation that you were blown away by the fact that your directive wasn't followed. What did you do then? Did you, and I guess in specifically what I'm asking is, did you have any conversations with your direct report Mr. Tribbiano's office or the person who runs Mr. Tribbiano's office and/or Mr. Koskinen?
At that particular time, the TIGTA investigation was still going on, so I was not allowed to talk about the conversation I had with TIGTA until after the report was
But
released.
when you, okay, so when you learned that the tapes had been destroyed, your directive wasn't followed, you had no conversation with the commissioner?
No.
Have you had subsequent to when it became public, have you had conversation with the commissioner
Yes, sir.
about this specific issue?
In the general conversation around backup tapes, yes, sir. And that's what I was trying to correct earlier. We have retained backup tapes for indefinitely since that email was issued. Those were off of the Exchange system, which is the primary email system of the enterprise.
I get that, but I'm asking more specific. Did you have a conversation with Mr. Koskinen and say, look, I gave a directive, it wasn't followed, 422 tapes, backup tapes were destroyed, we no longer have those records at all? Did you have that conversation with Mr. Koskinen?
No, I did not specifically.
Okay. One final one here. In the opening statement, you talk, and this is Mr. Maruka's situation. His hard drive was designated for erasure before the issuance of the litigation hold. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Yet you said later that his data was, in fact, though, backed up because you had another litigation hold.
Yes, sir.
So why didn't the previous litigation hold prevent you from destroying the hard drive?
Because the data was backed up and it was sent to the digital. What happens is when the attorneys request the information, it goes into their I might be calling it the wrong thing, their e-discovery system where they can access the data and do whatever they need to do for discovery purposes.
And just to be clear, a litigation hold doesn't trigger preservation of hard drives. That only triggers it goes to a backup?
No, sir. It preserves the records for use in the litigation.
And the best record would be the hard drive, not the backup. But under this situation, you didn't do that.
The records are what was on the hard drive and backed up at that point in time.
Will the gentleman yield?
Sure.
Then why did the Department of Justice, on behalf of the IRS, go to the court and say these records had been destroyed?
Because at that time that we notified the Department of Justice, we thought that his hard drive, but we didn't know that we had the backup of that hard drive for that other litigation. So we told the Department of Justice that we did not have the hard drive.
And you have no records of what you destroy and when you destroy it, correct?
That is correct. What we know is that on 10/27, it was received in Memphis, and between that period and the period of April 16th, I believe, when the shell of the computer was delivered to the third-party vendor was during that time period.
How convenient. You have no records of what's destroyed and when. And yet you require every American to keep all their records. That's what's so fundamentally wrong and screwed up with the IRS. That's just wrong. And there are a lot of good people that work at the IRS, but you know what? You go after Americans, but you don't take care of business at the IRS. It's just wrong. It's just wrong. And it causes mess. We're talking about a $1.7 billion case, and you guys can't keep track of what you destroy and when you destroy it. How hard is it to put a log entry in there, destroyed this one on this time? Like, how long does that take? I mean, you can go to Best Buy and buy something off the shelf for like $50. I just don't understand that. Do you have an answer for that?
I don't think it would be that difficult, sir.
Then why isn't it done?
I could turn that over to Mr. Mulholland